Welcome, 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 and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Black Music Scene podcast. For those who do not know me, my name is David Norville. I am an oboist, and I'm also a podcast producer. In my day-to-day, I work for New York Public Radio's classical station, WQXR. I produce shows like Helga and Every Voice with Terrence McKnight, for those who are familiar. But today I'm coming to you as the producer of Black Music Scene, a show that's brought to you by the Black Orchestral Network, where we're all dedicated to supporting Black orchestral musicians through cultivating community, lifting our voices, and telling our stories. So our podcast, Black Music Scene, falls in the telling our stories bucket. You know, the show is all about archiving the stories of Black identifying people and their experiences in classical music. In particular, we like to look at folks who have dedicated a lifetime to the craft, right? People like Ann Hobson Pilot, right? 40 years playing harp in the Boston Symphony, or Rufus Olivier Jr., who in San Francisco started playing in the symphony in 1977 and still plays today in the opera and the ballet, or say Booker Rowe Jr., the violinist, Philadelphia-born violinist who spent 5 decades playing violin in the Philadelphia Orchestra. Of course, it is no secret that we are underrepresented in this art form, right? Like, if that wasn't the case, we maybe wouldn't be here today, but it would be wrong to say that we have been absent. It would be wrong to say that we have not been here. Excluded, yes. Exiled, maybe. Disenfranchised, but we have been here, and so Black Music Scene is dedicated to preserving and archiving those stories for generations to come. So today, here at Sphinx Connect, we're going to get a chance to do just that. On stage, I'm joined by 4 beautiful souls who, in their own way and along their own journey, have dedicated much of their life to their love of the art form, their love of performance, their love of sharing beautiful music with beautiful people. But before we meet them, I want to mention we are here to have an intergenerational conversation. Our episode today seeks to find new truths and insights through exploring our experiences. You know, the experiences of people who, yes, entered classical music from different places in our nation and abroad, but more importantly, entered at different places in time. So we're going to explore some of the similarities and differences in our journeys, some of the progress that we've witnessed, and the challenges that still need to be overcome. Okay, with all of that said, let's go ahead and meet our guests. I'd like to, maybe we can just go in order like this and share with our audience, you know, a little bit about yourself, your instrument, where you're from, and also tell us the year you officially won your first job.
My name is Dale Breidenthal. I play in the Los Angeles Philharmonic. I officially signed my contract in 1983. And so therefore I am just a year away from retirement, actually. So, did I say I play violin? Yeah. So.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone. My name is Francisco Joubert Bernard, and I'm the second bassoonist of the Louisville Orchestra. I got this job in 2019, so I'm pretty fresh to the workforce, as you would say in the orchestra. And yeah, I played bassoon.
I'm Jennifer Arnold. I play viola. I joined the Oregon Symphony in 2005 and resigned in 2020 when I went into arts administration. But I will say that my first official job was in the Akron Symphony, which I think was in 2001 in undergrad.
I'm Joseph Conyers. I'm originally from Savannah, Georgia. I play the double bass. My first job was with the Grand Rapids Symphony in 2005, and I'm currently principal bass of the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Excellent. It's so great to be sharing the stage with all of you, and I really want to wish you a warm welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on Black Music Scene. Dale, I actually want to start with you a little bit. Technically, this is your second time appearing on an episode of Black Music Scene. Recently, you allowed us to capture your story and add it to our growing archive of artist portraits. And while that episode is slated to release next month, I wanted to bring a sneak peek to share with everyone so that we could do some listening together. And I think we have that tape prepped. Can we roll tape?
My name is Dale Allmond Breidenthal. I play violin with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. I've played officially with the Philharmonic since 1983. I am the daughter of Plato Allmond and Ramona Wilson Allmond from the West Adams area of Los Angeles. Well-respected violinist and teacher at USC accepted me into her studio, and she encouraged me really to pursue music as a major. I love classical music. Growing up, it wasn't a hobby, it was something I did. It was a part of my growth, part of what I enjoyed doing on the weekends. A lot of my friends were playing music. It just had never occurred to me to pursue music as a major, but I was in the right place at the right time and pursued music. Why do I love classical music? I think because we could play in a big group and produce such an amazing sound. You know, when you play in the orchestra with horns and flutes and trumpets and the low strings, you're adding to that sound, and what it adds up to is pretty spectacular. I think everybody, if they got a chance, would be crazy about it.
So that is a sneak peek from our upcoming Black Music Scene episode featuring Dale. And, you know, of course, 4 decades, no easy feat. Nothing easy about that at all. And of course, there's so much that can be said about what it might mean for you and what it means for people of color and the industry at large. But I think what is most appropriate to say in this moment is definitely a word of congratulations. And, you know, if we all could just actually take a moment and, you know, just really, you know, we appreciate you, we love you, all of those things. And of course, thank you for all that you've done. So I want to stay with this for 1 second and I kind of want to start a conversation about, you know, some of the things you maybe witnessed, being able to, you know, watch the organization grow over 40 years, right? So the question I have for you is, you know, over your 4-decade career in LA, how have you witnessed the growth and evolution of the organization, right? Like, what are some of the most significant changes that you've observed? And amidst these changes, what has remained consistent?
That's such an interesting question. And for me, the biggest change in LA is we went from having no hall to our own home. You know, and we now play in Disney Hall. We used to play in across the street in Dorothy Chandler, and so we were kicked out regularly for Academy Awards, for the Civic Light Opera, for ballet season. But what we did instead was we went out into the community, and we would go out, we'd actually play at schools and high schools, churches. So we were out meeting the people of LA. I do miss that. And of course, now we have this gorgeous hall where people are all invited to. And I think the LA Phil is one of the more welcoming philharmonics. It really tries to think of what can we do to really get people in and love our music. So that was a big change. LA Philharmonic went from being more of the bottom of the list of the big fives to rising up to challenge any of the East Coast Midwest orchestras. So that's something incredible. It's a more international orchestra.
And what do you think has stayed consistent? What are some things that have stayed the same, do you think?
We don't have too much that stays consistent in Los Angeles.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
We're a group of, I really couldn't think of an answer to what has stayed consistent, except I'm still there.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I can go on all day about what it means and how much we appreciate you for all that you've done. But I have three other people here that we want to hear from as well. So this next question is a personal favorite that I love to ask on the platform, because I think it's a beautiful way to give insight into our origin stories and also tap into some of the universal things that always keep us coming back to the instrument and keep us coming back to the music, even at times where things around us might be a bit unsavory, right? So we can just go, actually, maybe starting with Joseph down there, going this way. So the question I have is, in your early years as a musician, what were some of the most memorable and joyous musical moments that you experienced?
Okay, all right, great question. So I grew up in the South, Savannah, Georgia. I grew up in a traditional Black Baptist church, so music was part of my life from day one. Singing in the church choir from when I was a kid, hearing gospel music, that played that was a big influence on my life. But I also had a mother who heard classical music on the radio as a child and said, I want my children to do that. And so from an early age, she found a teacher for my brother, a piano teacher for myself, and a cello teacher for my sister. And I started piano at the age of 5, and with a Black music teacher, Rose Smith, Savannah, Georgia. And so immediately from a young age, there's classical music, because I was learning classical music on the piano, and listening to my brother and sister play classical music with their friends and ensembles as cellists and violinists, and then hearing gospel music. What I always like to say is for me, they were the same thing. They're exactly the same thing, just two different languages. But the end result was always the same. And so, so church was easy. And then early on, because my mom was an amateur singer, she sang in the Savannah Symphony Choir. Chorale, I think was the official title. I was hearing Beethoven 9 and Carmina Burana and all these huge choral works with the orchestra. And I just fell in love with it. I cannot tell you when. People ask me, when did you start loving music? I didn't start loving music. I always loved music.
Of course.
And it's always been a part of me. And the rest is kind of history. But that kind of just lays the groundwork of how I got started. And just for the record, I started playing double bass at the age of 11 because I got sick and tired of being by myself playing the piano. And I wanted to play with my friends too, so I started the double bass.
Wow.
And started playing in orchestra. I mean, I can go on and on with stories. Whether it was playing in local ensembles, my first all-state experience, being in a full ensemble. Dale was mentioning the sound. The sound of an orchestra, I still remember hearing the Savannah Symphony play and just being mesmerized. It was so beautiful. Strings especially, sorry, no offense to anyone else, but strings especially, it was magical to me. Yeah. And I'll end this portion by just saying I had supportive parents. I had a community of folks who put their energy around me and my family so that I could be given the resources to excel in this field that requires many resources for success.
Of course.
And yeah, again, the rest is history.
Beautiful. Wow. Just excellent. Jen.
So I forgot to say earlier that I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. And so my parents started me on violin at 4, but their story is that they were educators. They were teachers at the time in the early 80s. But my mother, she went to Central State University, which is at HBCU in Ohio, and the only reason she could attend college is because she got a full scholarship on viola, which she had started in the 8th grade in Cleveland public schools. So her love of music and her experience, she read one of the teaching magazines. I think it's like Ohio Teachers Magazine or something, and they had an advertisement about the Suzuki program, and she was really interested in the parent, teacher, child, kind of just studying what that meant. And this was in '83, and I should also preface this because my dad's probably watching. He played piano in a jazz band, even though he was a teacher. So they both played instruments as amateurs. But my mom read this article about the Suzuki method. Cleveland Institute, she was looking for where they had one. Cleveland Institute of Music had one. She took me at 3. And at that time, I was too small. They don't do that anymore. They, way smaller. But at that time, they said I was a little too small for my first violin. So they put me in Eurythmics class. And so my first memory of music really is in Eurythmics class. If people know, they let you run around clapping rhythms. It's the most amazing thing when you're 3 years old. It's like perfect. Quarter note, half note, run around, to piano playing. So that's my earliest memory. And then, of course, what happens in Suzuki at 4 when I first started playing, I got my Cracker Jack box violin, which for the first year, which is huge. When you're a kid, you're like, I just want to open the box, and then I finally did all those things. And so that's my earliest and most memorable memory. However, I have to say, like, for me, some of the most life-changing memories for me are certain moments when I went to Interlochen and formed a lot of the black classical friendships that I did, like at 8, 9, 10 years old. Sphinx competition. We're OG Sphinx, first competition, me and Joe. So the majority of the people in that group were still in a friend group, So these are my most memorable musical memories, I would say.
Beautiful, yeah.
In my case, I'm originally from Puerto Rico. So I have 3 moments that I can kind of vividly remember just being like plastered in my brain because they were so big for me. And the first one is, before I used to play the bassoon, I used to play trumpet. And I remember just playing some E.T. on a band like that. I know this is a very simple story, it is, but for me, that kind of marked me in terms of something that I've heard a lot, just I'm actually doing that. That kind of marked me. The other thing was when I got my first bassoon for the first time. And I started bassoon as a hobby. And well, that hobby's still happening. And I remember just opening the bag. I was so obsessed with this instrument, to the point that I made a PBC mock bassoon to practice my fingerings on it. And that's when my dad noticed, like, okay, this kid is crazy. Maybe we should buy him a cheap bassoon on eBay. And that's what he did. We made a deal, and I got that eBay bassoon. It was like a knockoff. It was terrible. I called it a bassoon in B major because it was so flat that that's what I did. So, but it gave me the foundation of what I needed to be here. And the third memory that I have is playing in an orchestra for the first time, because in Puerto Rico, I mean, bassoonists I probably know them all. And we usually, if you play a woodwind instrument, you're mostly put into band, so that's technically your experience. But I remember there was a year that they had the Venezuela, like El Sistema, people came from Venezuela and they coached us. It was like a huge orchestra. And that was my first time playing in a big orchestra, and I felt like it was so exciting. I met other bassoonists. I was like, wait, there are other bassoonists in Puerto Rico. So that's the other big memory that I have just growing up.
Wow.
Music.
Do you still have that PVC?
No, unfortunately I don't. But there's a video I did at New World that has a little mock-up, the second mock-up I did, just to showcase what kind of it was.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But.
Wow, excellent, thank you. And finally, Dale.
For me, we played in a community orchestra, Mount St. Mary's Community. It was for youth orchestra, And I just remember my first concert at that with that orchestra, and the horn player, you know, they were older people, like maybe 10 years older than us, playing in the same orchestra, and just the beauty of the horn playing and clarinet, and it was the people in the front that knew what they were doing, and it was amazing just to tag along and be in that group. That's one of my best memories from.
Wow. I love that. And of course, there's that common theme of a rich community around you, pouring into you, supporting you, allowing to sort of build a solid foundation for that association with your craft and the music. For myself, you know, of course, I asked the question to think about some of the beautiful aspects come out of that, but I also think about, you know, how we progress through this field, and as Black classical musicians or classical musicians of color, having certain aha moments where we realize, that might have been an epithet, or that might have been a microaggression or something like that. And so I want to ask a question that has to do with, you know, how the world around you through your upbringing has had an impact on how you move through the world, right? So just for context, right, like my family comes from the Caribbean and, you know, Guyana and Jamaica respectively, and I understand that I was raised and socialized with maybe a different racial politic that I then had to learn while I was in school, or learn while I was, you know, learning people, you know. And so I have a question that goes along the lines of, you know, through your career, what historical moments have had a serious bearing on how you chose to show up in the world? How did historical events influence your musicianship and your sense of inclusion, right? So for myself, again, like I'm representing here Gen Z. I'm a 98 baby. I never had a Rodney King moment. I had a Trayvon Martin moment, you know. So to be able to watch it on TV and receive that through the media had maybe a different effect than, you know, receiving a different story through another publication or another source of media. So again, the question is, you know, through your career, these historical moments, any takers to go first? Joe.
You said any takers? I
Yeah.
didn't know if you were pointing at me.
Yeah,
Wasn't necessarily volunteering in that moment, but
Well, we're here.
since we're here, so I can't think of a particular moment. I think because having grown up in the South, both my parents went to an HBCU, Savannah State College at the time, now Savannah State University, and there was, how can I say it? There was a lot of pride in the success of blacks in the country throughout time. A lot of great, just inner pride. The church I attended, our minister was very heavily involved in civil rights in the city. I'm dropping all these names. Reverend Benny R. Mitchell, Jr., he got MLK Drive in Savannah. It was very, very instrumental in that. Black History Month at our church was always really big. So just being pride, having a lot of pride being a black person in this space, in this world. In a world where just 13 years prior to my birth, MLK was shot and killed. And in a world where my parents grew up in a very segregated place. Buildings that I was able to walk into where they weren't able to walk into. And so that was normal. That's my point. That was normal for me. Yeah. People get offended by, seeing the Confederate flag, for goodness sake. Up until 2001, 2/3 of the Georgia flag was the Confederate flag. So again, these things were normal. So the reason I mention all these things is because despite all the adversities that my parents had to endure, ancestors, of course, family, friends had to endure, there was a great pride of persevering in the space. And I've always taken that with me. everywhere I went. Between that and the church, I knew I was never less than because of anything.
Beautiful.
I always just did my best to show up and be the best representation of myself, of my family, and of my ancestors at any given time.
Certainly.
Everywhere I showed up. So for me, it wasn't one particular thing. It was just being in an environment where we acknowledged the world, but we're very determined to persevere in a world that may have historically been very much against any kind of success.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to follow up on what you said, Dave, that I have a similar experience because I grew up in Puerto Rico until I was pretty much 22. And the dynamics between race are a little different. It doesn't mean that there aren't, there's not racism in it, but it's navigated differently. And I've been lucky enough, I would say, that my career has been pretty straightforward. I graduated from the Conservatory of Music in Puerto Rico. Then I went to Yale. Then I went to New World. And then now I have the job. And there was no gap in between. However, when I went to Yale, that was my first connection to being in the States. And in Puerto Rico, most of the time, if you're black or white, people don't really see it like that directly. You're just Puerto Rican, like whatever. But when I came to the States, that's the first time I could notice the perception of people towards me changed. I was seen differently until I spoke, which it was ironic because it's like until they didn't know I was Puerto Rican, they like the perspective, like, oh, yeah, this person is black, and whatever they had in their subconscious of what that meant. And that's where I started to be actually being curious of what does it mean to be black in the States. And it's been quite the journey, just educating myself of what it means, and also experiencing what that means. It was things like going to, and I know they have their representatives here, but this is something that happened. So, I remember being in the offices. I had to bring this paper to the School of Music, to the offices. I go to the office, and I'm like, hey, so where should I get this document to, or where should I put it? And the first response is like, do you go to the school? And that was like the time I remember just being shocked, like, where do you think I got this paper from? It's like, yes, I go here. And so, it's just one of many. The other thing that happened too is like my connection to the black culture became stronger. Because now again, the same thing that happened with white people that would see me, they're like, yeah, this is a black person. The same thing would happen with black people that they will see me. It's like, yeah, that's one of us, and I am one of you all, right? Like, I don't want to get that out of the way, but I'm just saying, like, it was very interesting how well, besides like after knowing that I was Puerto Rican, it's like, no, dude, you're black like us. Like, you're getting the same treatment, and you're part of our culture. You're part of this family. And that was very eye-opening, and I'm still learning a lot. I love this, every time I get the chance to see the similarities in the cultures. Because we have ways of doing things differently, maybe, but there are so many commonalities, and that's what I really try to focus on. Wow. And also the other thing that happened is, like, once I got the job in Louisville, that's when the Breonna Taylor thing happened. And that was huge because you could really tell just in the town, it was just happening and you could see it. And musically too, some of the projects and some of the intent of the music changed when that happened. And then Floyd, that's the one that I really felt like I needed to say something through my music, and I made a little project about it. But
Wow. Yeah. Thank you.
I can go next.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of my aha moment, but I think I'm a little similar to Joe, where because my parents were educators and because I was raised in the church as well, Lutheran, which is, of course, the old Lutheran hymnals, very close to classical. It is classical. Same composers. That music, and I played a ton in church, and I like to say I played for every black organization in Cleveland for my whole childhood. So I got to see these organizations, I got to see some of the greatest speakers, right? And be a part of these activist movements and things like that in Cleveland, musically, because I was opening for them, or I played, in the middle of the ceremony or something like that. But I also met them all, and I got to listen to them. So to me, music has always been, along with that, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine not. So that also grew. I will say from a young age, I was also like a representative of something. Even from like third grade, I was on student council or something like that. So there's always been some kind of like urge to lead, to do more, to help, and to play. So it goes hand in hand with me. So I don't think there was an aha moment. It's always kind of just been music and activism together.
You're immersed in that, yeah.
Yeah, and the instrument has helped. Sometimes it just helped organizations just to help their what's it called, their ceremony, pretty it up, a little bit.
Yeah.
But sometimes as I'm older, I try to do I try to do more things with playing to be more intentional about, what the music says. I would say, as opposed to just prettying up a ceremony or something like that.
Totally. Yeah, I hear you. And Dale?
And I grew up I was born right before 1960, couple days before 1960. My first memory is being in someone's neighbor's apartment when JFK was assassinated. I have that flash. And then just the turbulence of the 60s. It was a horrible time, excuse me, to grow up as a black child. And so history, many times with heavy hearts, of course, as children, excuse me, got it. You play anyway, you've got your joys in life, but it was a heavy time. Just people being, as a child, I was the people used to watch TV, and you would see the people being sprayed with the hoses and the dogs being sicked on these people who just wanted to be treated like everybody else, and filtered through my eyes, and we would, go to our music classes and everything else, but it was something, I think, that's deep inside of us. And so I became aware of being black from that time period.
Yeah, I appreciate all of you just delivering just beautiful storytelling and honest and sentimental storytelling as well, as we navigate this. And it's difficult to talk about the things that are painful, for sure. So I appreciate you all you're certainly going there, and actually in some of the things that you all shared, it made me think of that phrase I hear from Alex Lang all the time about music being not just sound, but sound, words, and people, and the real significance of being able to have a community to nurture you and to seek refuge, but also to be able to talk about it, right? And so that's part of why we're here today. Like how can we raise our consciousness through conversation? Kind of want to move to the last sort of part of the conversation that I want to have here today. Just thinking about looking towards the future, thinking about tenure as well, right? So as some people might have seen, the Black Orchestral Network has launched a second part of our campaign called Dear American Orchestras. This is part 2, and largely we're calling for real change to tenure practices in orchestras. It is certainly a civil rights issue. It is certainly an issue of disenfranchisement. It is certainly an issue of job retention. And for me, as I mentioned, a representative of Gen Z, I recognize that there are many Black orchestral musicians my age and younger who are really now exploring different avenues of performance outside of the orchestral hall. People who love the craft, love their instruments like you would a child, but are seeking that sort of performance elsewhere. And it makes me think about the ways that we're trying to make change within rigidity, trying to make change within hierarchy and things like that. And understanding that that kind of hierarchical social structure comes from a practice that is aristocratic, that is centuries and centuries old. And so it leads me to think sometimes, where does the baby end and the bathwater begin? Like what must we dispose of in order to find the level of change that we're looking for? So this next question I want to direct to Jen first. I'm going to combine 2 different questions here. So, thinking about our existing practices and some of the social behaviors that we've normalized in this orchestral performance space. What social norms and behaviors do you think should be reviewed for us to fortify a more inclusive environment, less hostile environment?
Yeah, I feel like I have a long list, but I'll just start with some. I mean, I think I talk a lot about, with other musicians, a positive work culture and what that means. And so I used to do this thing in Oregon where when I played really well in a concert, I would actually acknowledge I played really well. I'd get off stage, go into the viola nook, that's where the violas hang out, and I'd be like, man, I really played well today.
For sure.
And at first people looked at me like I was crazy, because that's not really, people don't really do that in our, but I was like, but I played really well.
Yeah.
So, instead of being that person who's like, man, I missed that F sharp. Why didn't I get that finger? We do that all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's that kind of stuff. Words, I think about words of encouragement, positive thoughts, right? Telling your colleagues how well they sound, or they played well tonight. Showing them you're excited about a piece, excited about being at work, excited about the music, excited about just words of encouragement. So yeah, there are moments I like. Community concerts. I like family concerts. I like playing pops. I like playing films. And saying that instead of, always listening to the people who are like, oh, here we go again. Yeah. That's nice. That's you, but that's not us. And actually, that's probably not the majority of people. So that's my first thing. Positive words of encouragement, positive thoughts. I always joke that I will never sit on a dress code committee again. It was horrible. But things like this. Why are we talking about this stuff? I believe in. But that's a norm of orchestra, right? Concert black and and I mean, you could get real down the rabbit hole about dress code, but just why not bring if it's gonna be concert black, your vibe, Jess McJunkins, she does a little, what is it called, style guide. I'm all about that for orchestras. Let's do a style guide and you pick, your vibe. Like I said, I had a lot of thoughts, but. I think one of my biggest norm is that the principal is not your boss. That's one that I know is controversial, especially with wind players. Love you all, but we have this conversation Black Orchestral Network with our steering committee,
Yeah.
because it's really ingrained of the principal duties or what people perceive are the principal duties. Because if you read Black Orchestral Network's tenure letter, there's not a lot of language about principal duties and what that means and things like that, job descriptions. But yeah, like I personally don't, I said this last year, I think, at Sphinx Connect. I personally never thought my principal was my boss, right? They were my colleague from day one. And there are things that happen in the wind world, especially, or maybe even percussion or I should say non-string world, that it's not, the way that the level of respect is not given as adult to adult or professional to professional. And sometimes it seems like a student-teacher relationship, yet we are equal in the contract. So to me, you know, there are principal duties, of course, but like to tell me how to play, you know, to scold me, to do all those things, no.
Yeah.
The music director has their role. It's in the contract, and that's, you know, those kind of things. So to me, that's a big norm that I hope people talk about and, you know, have lengthy discussions like I've had.
Certainly.
I have to agree with that. I mean, as a second bassoonist, I have to. But in all reality, I think it's correct in terms of that. By thinking that our principal is our boss, it diminishes our role in the orchestra. I think even as a second bassoonist, I have my autonomy. Fortunately, where in the Louisville Orchestra, my principal lets me pretty much do whatever I want. Of course, I mean, as long as it's tasteful. But I think what that allows me is to explore my part, because even though most of the time I'm doing harmonies, sometimes those harmonies need to be amplified, especially if we're having tuning issues. That allows me the opportunity to kind of hint, like, hey guys, like, come with me. And you know, when you have someone who's very bossy on that type of thing, there's a lot of parts that get buried. I mean, I don't know if any of you have heard, just in my case, I've heard so many recordings where I'm looking at the score and I'm like, oh, look at this line, it's coming up, and then you don't hear it. And you're like, well, what happened there? So it's there. No one has that part and it's not being heard. Why is that? And I feel like it's part of that mentality of like your boss is like, no, you play second, you play less than me, right? So I think that's something that needs to be changed. The other thing that needs to be changed, I think, is how we let the audience express themselves. I think we have a very strong culture of like, you know, whenever you're playing, nobody says or expresses anything until the very end. And imagine just imagine any popular radio person doing a concert, and everyone has to wait for the very last note for everyone to just go crazy. You know, that just, why is our field different? Why are we suppressing people's emotion? Like sometimes, you know, it's like Tchaik, I know some people hate it, but Tchaik 6, I mean, after the third movement, we're just like, yes, you know, and there's people who get annoyed because it's like, we're not in the fourth yet. Yeah. Please hold on. And it's like, you know, I understand it, but if people feel like they are enjoying, I mean, isn't that what we're trying to do with classical music? Aren't we trying to make people enjoy the music we're playing for them? I don't think we should be dictating how they should enjoy that music. And I think just letting that freedom should be one of those things.
So we have just about 15 minutes left in this session here. I don't want to interrupt anybody if you were willing to go, but we actually have time for Q&A. I want to just acknowledge our virtual audience that's tuning in as well. And for those of you who might have any questions, you can ask on the Sphinx app or at the mic. And make sure to use the access code REN. Yeah.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
While we're waiting.
Yeah.
I had one more, because I knew when I saw Francisco talk. I was like, he brought this up last year at Sphinx Connect when you asked a question about professional development. And I think musician professional development funds should be part of the norm. So we should encourage musicians in orchestra, especially if they've been there over 10 years, 15, 20, whatever, to go out and learn more. And it could be, I was encouraged in Oregon. I think I got a little bit of money to do some community, to do some training for like teacher training, things like that, because we were, doing more community work, and I wanted to help write some language for some of our kids' concerts and things like that. So we should really encourage people, and it could be even as, sometimes people talk about playing levels changing. It happens, life happens. Encourage them to go out, give them a little money to go study with someone or play for someone or, take some time and, build up your skills again, something like that. So professional development funds, to me, for players should be a norm.
Nice, yeah, that's a great point.
Oh, and I just want to say that I am at a conference like this because I absolutely love what the young people ideas they're coming up with. Young people, I think they're more educated than we were when we were just wanting to get out there and start working, but a lot of you have a lot of different interests that you are educating yourself in, higher degrees, which I totally respect, an interesting, very elegant way of presenting things and I just want you to know that I am here. I will support your ideas, and they just make complete sense to me. The ideas you have that you keep bringing up for change, and it needs to be done.
Certainly, indeed. So we have some folks this is our online.
Yes, this question comes from online. How does the Black Orchestral Network follow up with their letters and calls to American orchestras?
Jen, please.
Okay, how do we follow up? So I think there's many different things. With this particular one, part 2 on tenure, just letting everyone know, we are going to make sure every executive director, general manager, and diversity, VP of diversity, or actually maybe the whole department, know about this letter. So that's the first thing. So we'll know that everyone has received it. What we do to follow up, however, some orchestras reach out to us. However, I would say within the steering committee, we reach out to certain people that we know. But I think as this letter is, we're going to be a little bit more diligent of actually reaching out to probably every orchestra and following up. Because it's really important that not only that people read, but I think I was talking about this with 2 people today, but actually learning what orchestras have done to change already. Some of these rules are in their CBAs, some are not. We don't know what's been added to some of these CBAs, or collective bargaining agreements. And more importantly, if there have been changes and progress, really highlighting those orchestras that have made progress so that other orchestras and musicians should, and I should say also administrators, know that the work is being done. Because I was saying today that often in our industry, the Group 1 orchestras are the highest budgeted orchestras. If they're not doing it, the lower budgeted orchestras will not do it as well. Or maybe they are if there's an interest, but it's much more in negotiation like, oh, what are these larger orchestras doing, larger, blah, 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 blah. If they change it, we'll change it. So that's what I would say. Following up with every orchestra.
Yeah.
And really, do you have anything you think?
Well, yeah, I think following up and then also being intentional about our communication with the folks that we want to support and build community with, right? So it is about going into the weeds and talking to those organizations, but also coming back to report, right? Because it is also a thing of our energy is cultivated and garnished through talking about these things. And so I think, going into the weeds, but then being able to talk about it publicly and generate energy and attention and awareness around that as well. Joe, did you have something?
No, I was going to say I applaud the Black Orchestral Network for its action and its work. Something I've always myself even advocated for. And I love talking about it in spaces like this because they're administrators. I just play the bass, you know. So there's very little I can do on the administrative side, but if I can influence by a suggestion or two, and one is finding a way to standardize this tenure process across the industry. Standardize it.
Certainly.
It should not be, I mean, and I think there's yeah, I'll just leave, there's so many things I want to say, y'all, I'm just trying to keep it even keel, but the process needs to be standardized because it shouldn't be one orchestra does this and another orchestra does this and another orchestra does this and no one knows what happens and transparency and all kinds of conflicts of interests and like how is this possible in this field where, by the way, the audition process is supposed to highlight the best applicant for the job. That's what the industry has decided. The audition highlights the best person for the job. So if that's the best person for the job, why aren't we doing everything to make sure they keep the job? That makes, it literally makes, to me, it's nonsensical how we allow for these things. So one is someone going into a tenure review meeting and being surprised that they don't get tenure. How is that possible? Yeah. It boggles my mind. So for those who have the power, and those who have the influence, if we can look for a way to standardize this process so that it's fair, so that it's equitable, and so that if that's the best person who's been hired for the job, then we make sure that they keep that job. Yeah. Because particularly in the last year or so, there have been some high-profile instances where there's been some questions about the process. Yep. And there have been some surprises along the way. So I just want to applaud y'all for doing your work.
Thank you. There's a question over here.
Yeah, hi. First of all, I want to thank you all. This has been great, and to hear everyone. I want to say, Jennifer, I think we were on the same dance floor last night.
For sure. For sure.
But with that said, I just wanted to actually thank Sphinx as well for giving us this opportunity to see so many different sides of you all, and getting to hear your voices as well as appreciate your crafts and what you do on stages and in meetings and things like that. So first of all, thank you for that. I want to ask a quick question. Joe, I think I heard you say this like maybe years ago where you were kind of talking about change and how, what you do, but you were saying you were surprised at how easy it was to change certain aspects of things, meaning like, oh, I don't get why they didn't do this in the past or something like that. And so I'm just curious for everyone, and Dale, I'd even love to hear your perspective too throughout, many years. What are ways to reevaluate like what we're doing and for organizations to reevaluate what they're doing to say, are we just not seeing it right now? Like that would actually be a really easy thing to change. So are there review ways to go about, that kind of checking up on yourselves?
Oh, okay, I thought Dale was gonna, I'll let Dale.
So how can we change? You're saying?
Or I was maybe like making sure that we're making, like not making change too hard. If it's easy, why not just make the easy changes?
Change is, people don't like change. They're afraid of change. I think it is, like Joseph said, I can't do it. I show up and I play. But if we can sort of get more people into the management level and come down from there, but make bold decisions in the higher levels of management, because it's an issue that has affected so many people, especially getting tenure. And I think management just has to get together and decide that there's just one way to do it and we're not going to deviate. We're not going to let, emotions and passions, and we're not going to lie about people. We're not make up things. We're going to stick to the rubric, and It's, recently I did have to step in for somebody who was questioned. This person won the audition. Maybe something was missing from the audition, but eventually, she will grow into the job, but don't just shove her out because you missed something, putting something on the audition that should have been on there. That's not her problem. She won or they won the audition. Just, they won it.
Yeah.
Support them, support your colleagues. I don't have answers.
Thank you.
I wish I had answers, but that's why I am here to listen to everybody's input. But I think infiltrating management.
Can I also add? Oh, did I? Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think, and just to quantify the statement, since it started with me, I think change itself is easy. Making the change is hard. Does that make sense? The change, you just do it. But making for that change is very, very hard, and I feel like that's the thing that we struggle with. That's the thing that I struggle with. Because I will tell you, I am, I guess at this rate, I feel like I can see the other side of my career at this point. And to be honest, at this rate, there's not going to be a lot before the time I retire. Not at this rate. Mainly because the systems in place are not allowing for the change that can happen to happen. So the role that I feel like I can play as a bass player, as an advocate, is to be knocking on the door as much as I can, because I know it's hard. There are young people in here just trying to get the job. It's hard for them to knock on the door and make sounds or to fight for things when their job might be at risk because we don't have standardized tenure processes, so they're afraid they're going to lose a job once they start making the points that they want to make. So I just want to say, change itself is easy, making the change is hard. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add, actually, the first question you asked was about what has changed in the job. I think you asked Dale what has changed over 40 years. It goes to this, actually. I think there's a lack of for a lot of, how do I say this? The job has really changed because the music has changed, right? When, even when I entered the Oregon Symphony in 2005, we were playing way less pops, films, you name it, with all kinds of, we're playing way more genres now, right? But we have an audition for that. So the actual audition process doesn't address the job of today. And that can go into community engagement work, can go to a lot of different things. But my point of this being that I think in the industry, actually just acknowledging that the job has changed a lot, starting there. And then as a musician, I think one of the reasons we started Black Orchestral Network was that we could talk to other musicians about change, right? Because administrators talk about this. They come to conferences and blah, blah, blah. But musicians, we don't actually talk about it too much. Actually, we've been talking about it since 2020. But before that, not so much. So we have to talk to our colleagues, right, about these changes and why. But starting with, the audition process, yes, it may not be fair and all this stuff, but actually, let's just be honest, we're not even auditioning for the job you're doing today. So let's start there. And then it blows people's minds because then it's like, I could get into the weeds, but all of a sudden it's like, well, what do we do? I've never thought about this before. Yeah. We're asking people to really start from zero. Had never had to think about this before. And then we're like, let's change it. So this is why it's a slow process. That's a long way to say it. But this is why it's a slow process, because people are just kind of having this conversation for like the last 2 to 3 years. And it's everything being thrown at them. Every, aspect. So, and when I say people, I should say musicians. Sorry, apologies.
Appreciate it, Jen. We have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more. It's like Kai. Hey, Kai. We have one more.
Oh, hey.
And then we'll have to wrap up because we're at time.
Hi, my name is Kai. I'm coming from the Oregon Symphony. Still going through the tenure stuff, but the question that kind of came up, and I want to thank you guys for your time and your stories and your wisdom already. It's been really great to just be a witness to such greatness. So the question that I came up with is, did you have any mentors or seek out mentors once you started your job? And if so, is there anything you remember them helping you navigate that might be helpful for people early in their careers? I know I heard you guys talking about the standardization process, but, or like if there were pitfalls to like avoid, things like that.
I mean, I did. My teacher was my mentor. I studied with Bob Vernon at Cleveland Institute of Music, and he told you what you needed to get to get tenure. He was very clear about that. He told all his students that. This is what you do. I don't agree with necessarily the language. I don't, he really said you keep your head down, make sure you're super prepared, make sure you're on time, you know, and for 2 years, and that's how you do it, right? That was kind of just what he said. And that was, but in general, he was a mentor. So if there was any kind of issue, I knew I could call him, right? And I knew there were issues once in a while with another student or something, and he would advocate, like literally get on the phone with that principal and say, yo, what's going on with my former student? That kind of stuff. So, but my teacher was my mentor.
And never buy a new car before you get to
That's right.
I think that's all we have time for today. Can we have one more round of applause for my wonderful guests? And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Black Music Scene Live. I'm your host, Dave Norville, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.